Happy Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, June the 30th, 2021, and today's daily Bible readings come to us from Psalm 18, 1 through 6, and 43 through 50. First Chronicles 10, 1 through 14, Mark 9, 14 through 29, or you could have read Psalm 88, 2 Kings 21 through 11, and then Mark 9, 14 through 29. I'm going to take a look at Mark, and I'm going to talk about, have you ever, for those of you who work, have you ever gone on vacation and then you kind of dread it because you're going to get back to where you work and all the things that you normally do while you're there, that none of that was going to get covered, and you're just going to be caught, backed up trying to catch up with it. It's kind of like the idea of getting back to the office after being gone for a week or a couple weeks. This story makes me think of that because it's this: Jesus has just been on the mountain with three of his disciples, and that's the story that happens right before that we call the Transfiguration, where Jesus had this really great time of fellowship on the mountain with his Father, and then also hey, Moses and Elijah show up and they have this great conversation about everything that he's got to do and will be doing and is doing. So he's got this mountaintop experience, and he comes back down off the mountain, and it's welcome back to the office, because he gets down off the mountain. First thing that happens, a bunch of crowds rush him, and then he looks, and his disciples are arguing with some guy about the guy's kid. So Jesus, after his nice day away, his personal time, has to straighten this whole mess out. So he walks back into it, and he's not happy about it. If you read the text, he's how much longer do I have to put up with you people, you faithless generation? One of his favorite things to say. And so he's trying to clear all this up. He's trying to figure out what happened, what's going on, and finds out that in his absence, the disciples who had not gone up on the mountain with him had attempted to cast a demon out of this sick child. And the demon made the kid so he couldn't speak, couldn't hear, and then would do crazy stuff like throw the kid down on the ground, make him writhe around, or throw him into the water, or throw him into the fire. Not good situation, and the dad is rightly concerned. But they failed miserably. They could not do it. All this group of remaining disciples, they could not do it. And so there's a conversation that he has with dad. You should look at that. That's a whole message in and of itself. But I want to focus on what happens later. So Jesus steps in. He asks some questions, and he casts out the violent demon before it can do any more damage to the kid, any more harm to him. And then also before the crowds show up and add another ring to this whole circus, because it says that he looks up after he's gotten these questions answered and sees the crowds running. And he doesn't really, that's not helpful. Doesn't need it to become just a sideshow. And so he takes care of business really quick, and then they move on. And it talks about later that night, when they're in private, which is a pretty good thing that they thought to wait until they weren't going to be, have crowds around listening to this. The disciples that couldn't cast out the demon asked Jesus, "Why not us? How could you do this? But why not us? Why could we not cast out this demon?" And Jesus has this really interesting question. He doesn't, you would think he would talk about, well, I am the Son of God, and I am the Messiah, and I have authority, which would be legit answers. But that's not the answer that he gives. He says, and he doesn't debate the question of whether or not they could even ever always do this. His answer is, this kind only comes out with prayer and fasting. So he talks about prayer and fasting, which is interesting because in prayer and in fasting, we're preparing ourselves and we're consulting with God. We're, engaging God in this process. We're acknowledging that we don't have the wherewithal, that we can't do this, and we are inviting God into the process when we intercede on behalf of others and with God for this. And so even Jesus Son of God, fresh from the transfiguration, doesn't rely on his power alone. He relies on his connection with his Father, because the disciples were right. They couldn't do it. They didn't have the power. They didn't have the authority. And maybe that was their problem here in this situation from the get-go. Maybe they jumped into it. I can't read their minds. I can't tell you what they're thinking specifically, but my suspicion is that when this guy shows up with his kid in tow and is asking for help, because if you read the story, you get the sense that he shows up looking for Jesus first and doesn't find Jesus there. So then he turns to the disciples and says, well, you're his disciples. You should be able to do this. And I think maybe the disciples were like, yeah, we should. We can do that for you. And I wonder if maybe they didn't attempt this just thinking that they themselves were that awesome and they had the wherewithal to do that. And they weren't humble enough to go to God in prayer first and let God do the work. Perhaps they thought it was about them, and they never trusted God to do what God can do. It's interesting because the text today from the first set of readings is 1 Chronicles 10:1-14. And it lists at the end of that all the reasons why God turned his back on Saul, the first king of Israel. And one of the things it says is that he didn't seek guidance from the Lord. He was in it for himself. He was in it alone, and he didn't seek guidance from God. Maybe that has something to do with it all. I don't know, just a guess. Anyway, that's the DBR for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Get out, enjoy the day, and we'll talk to you later. Boop.